Investor Intelligence provides general information only. You should consider seeking independent advice to see how this information relates to your unique circumstances. Please refer to the terms and conditions available at investorintelligence.com.au for more.
Welcome to this week's episode of Investor Intelligence, your weekly podcast on all things investment, hosted by me, Jacob Kearns. We've got an exciting episode today with two highly successful women where we'll be discussing business, money, and cultivating a more fulfilling identity. Well, this episode will primarily be focused on how women can get the most out of their lives and achieve their full potential. This is a conversation that I think everyone will benefit from, and much of the concepts discussed can be applied to all. So without further ado, my first guest today is an incredibly smart and talented leader. She's helped many people build highly successful property portfolios and is the mentor team leader at the Property Mentors. Welcome back to the podcast, Malika Kingwell.
Thank you, Jacob. Good to be back.
And my next guest is a former international equestrian competitor, as well as a mindset and performance coach to Olympic gold medalist who is now a renowned life coach running her own consultancy, helping women achieve the life of their dreams. Welcome to the podcast, Nicole Stewart.
Thank you so much. Very, very happy to be here with you both.
So we'll start with a brief introduction to yourself and how you got where you are today. So Malika, let's start with you.
Yeah, okay. So it almost sounds a bit backwards how I ended up in property. I originally studied fashion and textiles with the initial plan to go more into the interior design space. However, it wasn't quite fitting and gelling with my life at that time. So I found myself going into a real estate or traditional real estate job back in the UK in Norwich, which is where I'm from. Started off, as a junior negotiator. Over the years, sort of worked my way up to senior negotiator, and just sort of did that, for a few different companies over the years before I decided to pack my bag and backpack around Asia and Europe, and ended up in Melbourne, and here I am today.
Yeah, awesome. And what about you, Nicole?
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Jacob, you mentioned before that my background was equestrian sports, and I was an extremely ambitious athlete. And in 2008, which feels like a lifetime ago now, I had a significant horse riding accident, and fortunately, physically, I was fine, but mentally and emotionally, I wasn't the same. And that experience was such a turning point for me, and really the thing that taught me that being a great athlete wasn't just about my physical ability to sit on a horse and ride effectively or train effectively, that it was about how I felt and how I thought. And bless him, I had a wonderful coach at the time who suggested I go and do some mindset and human performance stuff for myself. And I had such an impactful experience going and exploring this performance coaching sort of mindset, human performance modalities. And those new tools that I gained really transformed me as an athlete. And I was inspired to then share those with others. And so a couple of years after that experience, I got qualified as a coach, and I went and started a coaching business. And my business began working with athletes. So I would either support people who had had an accident and who wanted to regain their confidence, similar to myself, or people who were competing and wanted to be able to perform under pressure. And I worked with athletes there right up to Olympic standard. In 2016, a few years later, I went through my own journey of burnout, and I'd given the equestrian sports 10 years of my life, and my goal had always been to go to the Olympics. But that experience of burnout made me reassess. I was 28 at the time, and it made me ask myself the question, do I want the next 10 years of my life to look the same as the last 10 years? And when I got really honest with myself, the answer was no. And I knew that that's what was required if I really did want to go to an Olympics myself. And that experience of burnout and the recovery process and the healing and educational process on the other side of that burnout experience gave me new tools and resources, which is what helped me steer the ship of my business into working with women in high pressure and high stress environments and supporting other women to either minimize or recover from burnout and to live a life that's really personally satisfying alongside their professional success.
That's awesome. And I really like that question. Do you want your life to be the same as it was 10 years ago?
Yeah. It's really great. We ask a lot of our members, well, all of our members will ask similar questions, understanding, like, what does your life look like now? What do you want it to look like? Are you happy with where it's gone? Are you happy with everything? Do you emotionally feel happy in yourself or in your day to day? So it's really interesting that sort of similarity. You took that journey for yourself and discovered for you.
And it's a balancing act, right? Because creating, say, a thriving property portfolio is a great goal to have. And also, if you're utterly sacrificing your today experience to be able to afford to do that, maybe that's not sustainable and we're not guaranteed tomorrow, right? We could get hit by a bus next week. That's a bit morbid, but I really think being able to straddle both of those realities is so important. And that was, what is your day-to-day experience like? And I had to get honest and go, oh my gosh, I actually don't want to spend the next decade feeling and doing what I've just been doing for a decade. So
yeah, amazing.
Well, Malika, sales and the whole real estate industry as a whole is typically very male dominated, right?
Yes.
How have you found the experience in breaking into that industry, and have you faced any challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I've faced challenges. I think, to be honest, what woman doesn't face a challenge when it comes to their working environment? But like you said, especially in the industry that I am in, it is very male dominated. And, I started when I was 21. So I was a very young girl. I had no experience at the time. I'd never even had a proper job, I say that, but I'd worked in retail space, bars, cafes, whilst getting myself through my college. So at the time, I was really fortunate. The first company I worked for, the office that I was in, yes, it was all males, but they were a really supportive team and they gave me a lot of the training and guidance that I needed in that time to build up my career. However, I found it was more my peers or competitors, essentially, within the same industry outside of my safe bubble of that office in this tiny little village in Elsham in Norfolk, where I would really I had to prove myself. And, even clients, I felt like I would have to prove myself. And for a long time, it would get me quite down. And it was really, to be honest, there was times I was really angry. And there has been times since then that I felt anger internally because of it, because I'm like, but why? Like, I'm just as good as you, Jacob, or just as good as or just as good as Bob Smith, who's sat next to me, but who's not right now. But I just feel like the effort I would have to put in was maybe 5 times more of the amount than maybe a male member of my team to even just gain that respect in the industry. Right. The turning point for me, though, I was about 23, 24, and I'd been working for this company for a few years. And I had this client, and he was actually an investor, even though at the time I was in traditional real estate. But this particular client was only looking to purchase investment properties. And, I'd met him a few times and we always got on. He was always, nice to me, but there was a certain level of, I suppose, arrogance about him. And one day he just sort of looked at me and he looked at my car. This is so ridiculous, but he looked at my car, which was like a 1997 gold Fiat Punto, and said, when are you going to finally get a decent car to show up to these properties to show me around this $500,000 asset I'm going to buy? And I just literally looked at him and I said, well, when you decide to buy this property and 3 more, I might be able to get myself a nicer car. And I know that sounds so mad, but for me, it was a turning point because it made me feel confident that I'd finally sort of spoken back, because I know for a fact if that had been a younger male or an older male, that comment wouldn't have happened. That kind of putting you down comment. You're not good enough to turn up and show me this. You're not good enough. You don't know enough. I'm an investor. I've been building portfolios for years. I'm an established 40-something-year-old man.
It's very entitled, isn't it?
Very much so. And he really had that energy. And I just remember being very proud in that moment. And then, going home and walking on the bubble of like, I'm proud, I've stuck up for myself, and I'm not going to let anyone sort of make tiny little comments to bring me down. And then the hard work that I've, put in, even though, yes, I'd always have to feel like I work a little bit harder when I was starting off, my results and my career progression proved to people I'm worthy of this role and I deserve to be in this space.
So is that how you sort of overcame this feeling, by getting yourself up to where you are?
Yeah. You have to do, and like I'm competitive internally. I'm a very competitive person. Even when I'm playing Monopoly with my family, I am the person in the family.
Monopoly makes or breaks.
It makes and breaks. I will pick up that board and I will flip it over if I'm not getting my way. I will, and I'm the first to put my hand up on that, and it's healthy, I think.
Is it?
Probably not quite healthy, but I am competitive, and I, in a sense, felt competitive to myself to have to prove everyone like, hey, I can do this and I will be well respected in this industry, knowing I would have to work a little bit harder than maybe somebody else, but I knew I would get those results, and it pushed me, quite frankly, it pushed me to achieve even better results, I think, than if I didn't have that lingering in the background the whole time that I was this young 20-something-year-old female,
Do you feel like you still experience a bunch of that today as a woman in the industry?
Interesting question. I think I definitely do, but the effect that it will have on me now is dramatically different to the effect it would have had on me 10 years ago. So still sometimes it might frustrate me, or I feel a little bit bothered by it, but I also know internally it's like, I'm sorry that that's how you feel, that you have to talk to me that way, or you don't respect me in that certain level.
It's definitely more of a reflection of them, I would say.
Yeah. And to be honest, an insecurity.
Yeah.
Throughout my career, I've had a promotion. I've had older males in the same space that I'm in take me outside and basically suggest that I probably haven't worthy it. And they, so it's okay. And I would just walk away and just think, that is a you problem. And I am so, so sorry that you view just the world like that. Yeah. Because that is sad. Like, that is a sad thing to feel.
It must have been satisfying getting the job.
It's so satisfying. It's a very satisfying achievement.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Do you find that this sort of situation is common with a lot of the women that you work with?
Yes. Short answer, yes. And particularly for women of colour as well, or migrant women. I've worked with some startup founders in Melbourne in particular who are these highly intelligent women leading like tech startups, and their feedback on when they go to sit in on, say, investor opportunities, and the way that male-run, male-led startups will commonly be selected for investment opportunities.
Yeah, right.
Even when on paper their businesses, the woman's business, is actually a better investment for a variety of reasons.
Wow.
So, it is a pervasive, sad problem that I think women face in a whole variety of areas of life.
Yeah.
I think that, what it really comes down to is how much emotional labor somebody wants to do every day, right? And how long they want to do it for. If you're stepping into a leadership role and then you're faced with an environment that's not receptive to what you're bringing into that leadership position, because you're a woman in this instance, and that results or entails a whole heap of having to brace yourself and be prepared for comments or criticisms that you don't feel that a man in the same situation would face. That requires a level of like emotional resilience that is just labor, right? And it's going to work every day prepared to some extent, like armor yourself up emotionally and be like, right, I'm ready for whatever, excuse me, but bullshit is going to come my way today, right? Yeah. I'm ready for it. And everybody's different. But the question is for those women, and I ask them this when they're in those situations, is how long do you want to do that for?
Yeah.
Because it's a choice.
Yeah.
And if you've got a really clear goal and you're like, like your story, Malika, which is so beautiful of, I know that this is going to push me to get those results and I know I'm going to have great results in this industry. So that helps you channel that energy that you need and be able to push through in those situations. Awesome. But for some people, the answer is simply when they get really honest, it's like, oh, I actually don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I actually don't want to go and put myself in the firing line every day, even though it is a cultural problem, even though it is a them problem. If you've legitimately gone through the appropriate channels and done all you can to implement behavioural and cultural changes inside that space and that's not been effective, at some point you've got to make the decision of like, well, how long do I want to do this for?
Yeah.
Here at The Property Mentors, we have decades of experience investing in property. We know what to look for and what kind of impact it can have on your portfolio. We have access to brokers, accountants, and property managers to make sure your portfolio performs. Visit thepropertymentors.com.au to learn more.
When we spoke last week, Nicole, you mentioned that each of us has a blueprint that is shaped by our past experiences, and maybe a lot of it is handed down from our parents, which sort of goes into your story as well a little bit, Malika, how your past in your career sort of led you to be more outgoing and get the results that you wanted. How do you typically work with your clients to peel back those layers and, in your words, peel back the layers of their unique psyche and make lasting changes?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I feel like I want to add one other little piece before I go into that's relevant.
Yeah, sure.
Just on the back of the male-dominated world that is real estate.
Yeah.
And I would say that if we zoomed out another layer and went, we live inside a culture that I would say orients itself and really prizes quite masculine ways of existing and navigating life. And those traits and qualities of being goal-oriented and determined and resilient and a bit fierce and linear and having that real grit they're beautiful traits. They're beautiful qualities for anybody to embody and to cultivate. But if a woman with a female body is inhabiting that more masculine, linear, mental, intellectual-based, logic-based way of being and is out of balance with a more sort of feminine, softer, more spontaneous, flowing, feeling, sensing, playful way of experiencing life, that creates a tremendous amount of hardness in her system. And I see that at a very nervous system level, physiological level, and in her relationship with her own emotional world. And I think that that's a culture at large situation that we're inside of. But I think that we are, as individual humans, microcosms of that macrocosm. And so many women are existing inside this reality where they have adopted and adapted to this quite hardened, armored, highly intellectual, highly goal-oriented, striving for results over celebrating her more sensual, soft self. And, in some way sort of succumbing or allowing that way of being to take her over a little bit, or buying into the belief systems that say that she needs to be that way to get love, to be valued. And I think that contributes tremendously when you ask your question, Jacob, about how I work with an individual woman's psyche, is really understanding where she wants to orient herself and how she wants to experience her life. And I say how she wants to experience her life, not just what she wants to create in her life, because I really believe that the things that we create pour forth from the way that we are, or our state of being. And as opposed to, I think our world has sold us this idea in the consumerist space that we exist inside of, that if you go and you get the results that you want or the things that you want, and then you'll be able to feel a certain way, or if you look a certain way, then you'll be able to feel good about your body. And I commonly have women come to me in their 30s and 40s and they're like, so I've got the house and the husband and the kids, and I've got the business and it's thriving and I'm making money, and I've gotten here and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't feel the way that I thought that I would.
Yeah.
I'm not happy. I don't feel full. Life doesn't have that sparkle that I thought that it would. And so when I'm working with that woman, it's about unpacking that original blueprint that you've acknowledged. And when I say that blueprint, or like the template of how they have believed they are meant to be and what they are meant to do in life, to get love, to be valid, to be successful, etc. What are their unconscious motivators that are driving them to show up in the world in a way that maybe actually doesn't feel good to them? What's driving them to continue to sacrifice themselves, to overgive, to not set boundaries where they know that they would like to, or that they know that they could or should? And when we start to unpack those things, I love to support women to start to orient themselves to, well, how would you actually love to feel?
Yeah.
And then there's a whole process around supporting them to move in that direction and to live into how I would describe, so much of our world today says, like, decide who you're going to be and then go be it. And I very much orient myself towards, and the women that I'm supporting, of like, well, let's like take all of that off and remove all of that and figure out who you are, and not try and be anyone other than just letting yourself be really, really, really congruent and authentic and you.
Yeah.
Are there questions that you ask to get to the bottom of someone's blueprint?
Oh, that's a great question. I will work with someone, and usually what will be going on when somebody presents to me is that either they're facing what they see as like a problem in their life. So they've got a problem in their relationship. They're snapping at their kids and then feeling really guilty. They feel totally like disconnected from themselves and exhausted. They've lost their libido. They are anxious at work. So there might be a problem that they're presenting with. Or less commonly, women come to me and they're like, things are pretty good, but I want to go over there and I'm not sure how I get there. Like, I want to live into this bigger possibility and I'm not sure how to do that. And from that place, it's about passing out the contributing factors in that challenge that she might be facing. It's like, okay, well, what's really going on when you're snapping at your kids? What needs do you have that aren't being listened to and met? How are you relating with yourself in that moment? Like, what are you saying to yourself about who you are and who you are as a mum? And what are you feeling in those experiences? And what else is going on in this situation? And I'll help her to understand all of the parts at play. I see snapping at your kids or loss of libido or being anxious at work as a symptom of a deeper disconnect that is happening, that they feel like they can't show up fully as themselves, or their needs aren't being met, or something like that might be going on.
Yeah.
Okay. And if someone was listening to that and they feel as though some of those situations are a little bit familiar to them,
yes,
how would you suggest they respond to that?
That's a great question. My answer would be to not avoid yourself. When life gets uncomfortable, it is really easy to pick up your phone and scroll. It's really easy to go pour yourself a glass of wine, get yourself another coffee. It's really easy.
Malika just put her hand.
It's really easy to sit down in front of Netflix. It's really easy to, essentially self-medicate with food, with whatever. Yeah.
Avoidance, right?
And avoid.
Yeah.
Avoid what's actually going on. And most people today haven't been taught the skill of how to sit with the sensations in your body that are your emotions and are anxiety and are stress and are fear. And so my suggestion, if somebody's listened to that and gone, oh my gosh, she could be talking about me, is to not avoid yourself, because your problems, and I'm doing inverted commas around my head when I say problems, because I don't think they're actually problems. They're just what's happening right now. What's going on in your life will never change if you don't actually confront yourself and confront what's going on. And that doesn't mean beating yourself up with the yardstick of perfection, because we all do enough of that. But it's about actually slowing down and stopping and being honest with yourself about how you feel, which can be really terrifying.
Absolutely.
Right? If a woman is having these experiences, she's married and she's got children and she's got this whole life that she's built. And I've had clients in this situation that she's going, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm living a lie. Does this mean I need to end my marriage? Does this mean I need to, et cetera, et cetera? And generally speaking, it doesn't mean those things, but it means that she needs to be able to have more of herself accessible and alive, and not to just be hiding who she is to show up for the needs of her family. And so my invitation would be to get honest about how you feel yourself, even if it's scary, because through that honesty, you'll start to see some things that you could do differently and some opportunities for being more truthful with life, which is healthy.
Would you have any tips for a lot of people, not women, but for everyone? A lot of people find it very hard to be honest with themselves and to sit down and reflect and say, okay, I'm feeling this way because of, for example. What tip would you give someone to sit down and just start that journey to be honest with themselves, to realize where they're at? Write things down, go for a walk, because you hear all of those things. You're told to meditate, write things down, go for a walk. But what if you've tried all those, or you just don't know how to apply those correctly? Have you got any tips and tricks, I suppose, that you could share?
That's a really great question. Thank you. And this is something I really find in a lot of the women that I work with, that they're really smart. They've read the self-help books and they've listened to the podcasts, and they're like, but I can't actually make it stick. What's going on? And the biggest thing that I can say in those situations is that that's usually a sign to me that they're trying to work their problems out. Problems, again, inverted commas, that they're trying to work their situation out from their intellect as opposed to feeling what's going on. And, if you imagine that if you're somebody who doesn't maybe have a skill set around feeling vulnerability and emotion, and you're going through life and life is offering you or providing you with stressful situations, your kids just won't get their shit together in the morning and you end up running late. You're your husband said he'd pick something up at the shops and he forgets, and just these
Jacob put his hand up.
None of us are perfect, right? But life is poking you in the I feel like I don't matter to him when he forgets me, and oh my God, I feel like my kids are so damn inconsiderate, and all of these things that are layers of emotion, and you can become a bit of a soda bottle that's all being shook up, right? And emptying that out is really healthy. But if you're going through life just bracing and going, oh my gosh, I don't want to feel all of those things, let me try and figure out how to make my husband value me, which is what is so often going on, as opposed to just being honest. Oh my God, I feel really hurt that you forgot the steak from the shops. I'm disappointed. We are meaning-making machines. I would say that everything that happens in our life exists at 3 levels. We've got the facts of what's going on. So husband forgets steak. Then we've got the feelings about it. Disappointed, let down, neglected, not valued, frustrated, perhaps. But then we've got the meaning that we make those things mean, which is he doesn't care about me. If he cared about me, he would bring the steak home because I asked him to, and he knows how hard I work for this family, and blah, 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 blah. The whole thing flows on from there, right? And so it's about being able to separate those layers out. And in answer to your question, Malika, journaling is great for this. Doing some letting yourself have a cry, screaming into a pillow.
It's good. Yeah. Maybe I'll do that tonight. I'm joking.
And being able to just be with that second layer of this, these are the facts and this is how I feel about it. I don't have to make it mean that he doesn't care about me. I don't have to make it mean all of those other things. And I can just feel my feelings of feeling angry and disappointed. And I'm going to let that out because I know that that's healthy by punching a pillow or doing a boxing class or screaming into a cushion or going for a run with the dog or going for a swim in the cold ocean and being whew. I mean, it's coming into summertime now, so it's not going to be so cold. But, there's all of these ways that you can discharge the sensation out of your body as opposed to holding it in and then turning it into stories about the people in your life.
So when you say layers, do you mean, so you've got your thinking mind, which is often, as you described, the lens in which we often react to things and try and think our way out of the problems. And then the second layer under that is the emotional one, right? Is that what you're referring to?
So in that instance, what I was talking about was those are layers that you just described. But what I was just referring to was the facts of a situation being one layer,
right?
Which is my husband forgot to bring home steak in that example. And then the feelings about that, which is frustrated, et cetera, et cetera. And then the meaning that I made that mean, which was he doesn't care about me.
Yeah. Right. So there's a deeper layer.
There's this downward spiral that occurs. And actually, and it's an oh so tricky spot to feel the feelings of frustrated, angry, disappointed, et cetera, and catch yourself before that. It's almost self-harming with your own thoughts.
Yeah.
like a level of like emotional self-harm when we hang out in that story about somebody who we care about not caring about us.
Yeah. It's very interesting. So for you using your analogy there, husband forgetting to bring home the steak, getting really frustrated, really angry, disappointed, but actually the layer underneath that is, I don't feel like you care about me. I don't feel like you love me.
Yeah.
It's almost similar to the sort of the journey that we'll take our members on when we're helping them set their goals, right? So the first thing we'll do is say, okay, so you want to build a property portfolio, fantastic, but why? Every time, and it's fine because it's very hard because people don't know because you're not taught and trained how to dig deep into what you want from your life and the goals that you want to achieve. It's, I just want 5 properties because, my mum told me I should do it and I run a really cool car. Fantastic. But why? And it's that building that layer and sort of understanding and digging deeper and deeper each time to really figure out what it is that's upset you about not bringing the steak home, or what it is you actually really want to get out of your long-term wealth goals.
What story am I telling myself now? What story am I telling myself about who I'll be when I've got 5 properties?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to be really successful and that's why I want them. And actually, you might not need 5 properties. No. You might need 2 to meet your goals.
Exactly.
And like, what story am I telling myself about my husband because he forgot the steak?
Yeah.
In that example.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like an ego thing that they think, I want this number because I think I'll be this person when I achieve that.
I don't know if it's an ego thing. I think
not necessarily the ego as in, I'm so great, but the ego as in how you want to picture yourself, how you want to see
the identity.
Your identity. Yeah, exactly.
Actually, exactly, Nicole. Like the identity. So like Nicole was saying, with a lot of her clients, with a lot of women, they have this identity, this energy that we have to put up because across the world, there is a very masc energy, dominant energy within a lot of career spaces. That's just what we're having to follow. People feel that they have to have 5 properties because it makes them sound really successful. But how? And why is that going to make you successful? It's
unpairing when this happens in my life, I will feel this way.
Yeah.
I love working with people to ask the question of like, oh, what if you could feel really successful or worthy or enough or full now? And cultivate that as opposed to needing to go out, like having your desired experience of life attached to the 3D world.
Yeah.
And, by all means, go and create a property portfolio. That's cool. Why not? And you should. But that's not where your sense of yourself as a success exists. Those 2 things can be separate.
Yeah.
And in fact, I believe that when you can separate them successfully, people then can like cleanly pursue their goals.
100%.
Because they're not like, oh, I'm desperate because my success is over there in the properties and I've got to get the properties so that I feel successful. And actually, I know that I'm a success. I know that I'm valuable and worthy and powerful and wanted, or whatever the things are for her or for them, that person. And now I'm free to go and either pursue a property portfolio, or maybe I'm going to get some shares, or who knows.
Do you have a question about investing that you'd like answered? Each month, we take questions from our listeners and put them to our resident expert, Luke Harris. With more than 2 decades of residential and commercial investment experience under his belt, Luke has seen the best and the worst of the property market. Have a burning question you want answered on an upcoming episode? Visit investorintelligence.com.au/questions and ask us today.
So are you saying often these negative feelings arise because there's a discrepancy between someone's identity and the situation that they're in?
That's one way to say it. It's like the identity believes success is having 5 properties, for instance.
Right.
And that identity has been shaped through conditioned experiences, things that we've learned, etc., etc. But actually, so often it's rubbish. Success isn't having 5 properties. Success is a feeling. And yes, you're so free to go and have those goals, absolutely. But getting honest about what am I really trying to experience by creating that wealth for myself can 100% can really unpair.
Yeah.
I think that goes into our own blueprint, right? Like we have these feelings and these expectations maybe because of our past experiences.
Totally.
Yeah. And once you understand what it is that you really need and what you want and why, you're going to continue to create and build success inverted commas, around you to feel happy. So then you come back and then we have those deeper chats and you realize, I don't need 5 properties to look good. I actually realize the reason why I want to do this is because I want to make sure in 10 years' time, when my mum needs medical support because she's older and in a wheelchair and I need to make sure she's looked after, I'm in a financial position to support that. And that is going to make us feel really good, because if we can't, then that's not going to feel good, in a very broad way of explaining it. But, essentially it's that. And it's very similar to what you're saying, Nicole. Like, once you realize what it is you need, why you need it, it can just change everything for every human. Yeah. Not just women. I know we're talking about women, but for everyone. You know?
And I can imagine it's quite freeing when you start to peel back these layers, when you're working with your clients and they're realizing that, hang on, I don't need all these things, or in your case, Malika, when I don't need all these property, and you start to really think about what you do want. Is that typically how it works when you're working with your clients?
Absolutely. It's, what do I really want? What's real?
Yeah.
And, if my experience of success is not dependent on an external result, if my experience of myself as lovable and good and worthy and enough is not dependent on the things that are happening around me in my life and my performance and the outcomes that I'm driving or my productivity, I'm totally free to create for the fun of life.
Yeah.
I'm totally free to pursue whatever genuinely brings me passion and joy. And yes, we exist inside a world where it's necessary that you create money, but if my experience of myself as valuable and good and wanted is not actually out there in my world, in my work, then I'm free to pursue those results from a really different place.
Yeah, and you're not governed by your own self-identity.
Yeah, and I actually believe that piece that we're speaking to right now is such a core puzzle piece in women's burnout. There is this undercurrent of striving and self-sacrifice to get something outside of ourselves that actually we already have right here, that like fullness and enoughness and a sense of self-love and relaxation is available right now inside of you. And, that striving to get something that's out there that I'm lacking here is the hamster wheel that burns so many women out. And if I can throw a statistic in there, the McKinsey & Co. 2022 Women in the Workplace study showed that like 43% of women leaders are burnt out as compared to 31% of men at the same level. And like, that's just astounding. Yeah. And there's really something to be said there around the psyche of overgiving and striving and self-care that women can learn.
Do you think that goes back into what you were saying before about societal sort of expectations favoring that masculine sort of energy?
I definitely believe that's part of it, for sure. Yeah.
Would you say as well, I mean, I'm not saying every single woman out there is naturally maternal and caring, but it's in our DNA, right? Women, we are in our DNA is to look after everyone else before looking after ourselves. That's just how we're literally made up. Yeah. And I do that. I always want to make sure everyone around me is going to be okay before I check in and be like, am I okay? Yeah. Type, scenario. I want to make sure my teammates or my friends or my partner or my siblings or my mum, like, are always supported, looked after, or they're looked after before. And then I'll be like, okay, now am I okay? Do you think that could be a lot of that as well? Because we're putting so much of that caring energy out to everyone. And then we forget, hang on, whoa, I need to think about me, but we don't.
Totally. Yeah. There's that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. Yeah. And that's essentially what we're talking about here. You hear women talk about it all the time. Or, I feel selfish if I am to do that. But if I can get a little science, nervous system, evolution on us for a second, when a little girl is born, she will, and this is true for boys as well, but there's more of a copy-paste scenario going on in a little female body, that when a little girl is born, she will really nest into her mother for the first 3 years of her life. And there is not a sense of self. She is part of her mother. And the mother's nervous system essentially gets transmitted to the little girl. And little girls will begin life with quite a replica, if you will, of mum's nervous system. And inside our nervous system is codified all of the ways that we're going to respond to stress, all of the ways that we hold ourselves, all of our belief systems about us. And we only have to go back 2 generations, and you're talking about war and poverty in most cultures, in most parts of the world. And so if those grandmothers, and this is fascinating too, right? Our little, like the little egg that became all of us was inside of our mother when she was inside of her mother.
That fascinates me.
You know, we were inside our grandmother at some point.
It's really interesting.
Fascinating, right?
It is fascinating.
And the impact of that woman's nervous system who was coping with war, was coping with poverty, was coping with all of the stresses of that time, was then given to her daughter, who was our mother's. And then depending on how much healing work she's done and how much of her own work she's done, she then offered that nervous system to us. And so, you know, we are walking around with a literal inherited blueprint of the like maternal line of our history. And that impacts, unless you've made conscious that which is not conscious. That feels a bit weird to say. That was a bit woo-woo. But unless you have made conscious the stuff that is like hidden deep in your psyche, in your unconscious belief systems, it will run your life.
Yeah.
And Carl Jung says something to the effect of that which is not made conscious will run your life, and you will call it fate. I can't remember what got me onto that tangent, but it felt really relevant.
It sounded great.
Yeah, it was interesting.
You've just blown my mind. I'm like now just thinking about my granny, who I know was a young mother in the World War II. Yeah. Like I know that. And
yeah, crazy. That was really interesting. So how does this sort of relate to women in their everyday life? How can they factor all that in to the way they make decisions and live their lives?
I think, okay, so I'll talk you through maybe the process that I would take my members on and how I would help support them and guide them through making decisions that are going to suit what their goals are and suit what their needs are. And it does go back to that layering of understanding your why and going through that goal process and that goal setting and really sort of understanding, okay, your life is where it is today. Where do you see it in 10, 15 years' time? How do you want it to look? Do you want it to look like how it looks right now? Is there anything you'd need to change in that? And if so, what does that change look like? And what do we need to make happen to have that change, right? So if it's that you need nothing to change and everything is great and you can't imagine your lifestyle, because for us it's more lifestyle changing and you want to be able to continue to sustain the same lifestyle, then for us it's understanding what figure, we have to put a figure against that of what you're going to need to be able to continue to sustain that lifestyle, to set those goals, to create a structured plan and strategy to achieve those.
Right.
Does that answer that question?
Yeah. Nicole?
Wonderful.
Nicole?
Yeah.
Anything to add?
Yeah, it's brilliant, you know, and it's so important to have a plan. It's so important to be able to do those layers as you described. And I'm so curious about how we can have a moment by moment or day to day lived experience that is genuinely nourishing and rewarding. And I really believe that comes from like our felt sense experience of our life and not just the things that we're ticking off in the world around us or the goals that we're achieving. Those things are awesome, but how cool if they can be bonuses on top of a life that already feels really nourishing and satisfying. And so I love inviting women to get really honest about how do you want to feel in your life. And of course, life can't always feel good, right? There's always going to be days. We're always going to have a day. But so many women, professional women, are existing inside an overarching experience of stress and frustration and disconnection from themselves and sort of being a bit numb and self-medicating with the things that we spoke about earlier. And that actually slowing down and learning how to relate differently with yourself and feel safe to feel your feelings and to like get back in your body and discharge some stress. I'm shaking around. But, being able to empty some of that shook up soda bottle tension and to take care of your well-being, your emotional, spiritual, mental self on a day-to-day level. And it doesn't have to be, none of us are like living in a cave as monks, right? In today's modern world, you want to go out and create cool shit with your life, and I celebrate that. But find ways that actually nourishes you, and find practices and tools and support that will feed you as a human being, because you as a human being are not your career, you're not your relationships, you're not your property portfolio. All of those things are important, but you're a whole human being before any of those things occur. And how are you feeding that? And most people aren't, beyond maybe going to the gym and eating well. They look after their very physical physiology, but then that question of, your mental, emotional, spiritual well-being, how can you feed yourself? How can you nourish yourself and create a life that is full in your emotional need sense?
Yeah.
Get curious about that, because then when you are out there creating your strategy and your goals, you're doing it from a like, I feel good.
Yeah.
I feel full.
And you know what you want.
I have energy. Yeah. I'm available for this, as opposed to this sort of depleted, exhausted striving.
Yeah. And that feeds into our emotional readiness. All of that is we've got, our educational readiness, using those tools that you were saying as well, understanding and knowing, being educated. But that emotional readiness, I'm telling you now, pretty much 10 out of 10, every single member that I would work with, if they are not emotionally ready, they will not take that next step, that next action step. So it just feeds into that. Emotional readiness is everything for everyone, for women, for men, for humans.
Awesome. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I appreciate both of you coming in. Do you have any final advice for how to actually nourish yourself and how to get yourself emotionally ready?
Emotionally ready, everyone's so different, so I don't feel like I could really speak on how as an individual you could get yourself emotionally ready through the way Nicole would. But in terms of when you're taking that next step into building a property portfolio, team of people to support you, having that education and putting a plan into place, and I think that will all feed into itself to be emotionally ready. And I just think, in terms of going off, the question you had right at the beginning about how's it been working in a male-dominated industry, and I would just suggest just know your worth, pick your battles, and don't hold back.
Ooh, juicy. I love that.
Thanks.
My final advice would be get out of your fucking head. Get out of your head and get in your body. Yeah. Love it. Stop trying to figure out your life from your intellect, because while it's great, there's this whole world of energy and aliveness and pleasure and joy and possibility and trust available to you when you learn how to get into your body. And those things don't come from being smart.
Yeah, it's like that saying, you're too smart for your own good.
Totally. Yeah, you're like the logic becomes a prison, like a shiny prison. And perfectionism and trying to look like you've got everything handled and like all the answers is a prison.
Yeah.
And like get messy and feel yourself and get out of your head and in your body.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yes.
No worries.
Appreciate the invitation.
It was great.
If you found this episode or any of our episodes helpful, please make sure to share and leave a rating to help us reach more people on their investing journeys. And of course, subscribe to be notified when new episodes drop. Make sure to follow the podcast on Instagram @Investor Intelligence Podcast. You can find links to our other socials in the show notes, including a link to the Property Mentors weekly blog. If you're ready to get your property portfolio in shape for financial freedom, check out Luke's latest book, Property Fit. You can get yourself a copy at www.propertyfitbook.com.au.